Hi, everyone. We're going to start the call at 5 after. All right, everyone. This is Jessica Bagian. We're going to go ahead and get started. Acting State Superintendent Beth Ciano will be with us shortly, but she is finishing a call with the governor and GOSEP. All right. We're going to walk through guidance in a number of critical areas that you all have sent in questions, feedback, and concerns. As we did the other day, we will take these in chunks. So I will walk through a set of updates related to accountability and assessment. Then we will pause, answer questions. Then we'll transition to updates from federal program matters, and then a section about distance learning and academics. And then we will close out the call. So up first, to talk about assessment and accountability, as you are aware, Betsy President Sandy Holloway on Saturday signed a waiver of a series of BESI provisions that added more flexibility for all things accountability and assessment. And then yesterday, BESI President Holloway, as well as House Ed Chairman Ray Garofalo, sent a letter to the governor requesting additional state statutory flexibilities, which we anticipate will be granted, and we will share that with you as soon as they are. And then finally, in that letter, BESI President Holloway committed that Acting State Superintendent Beth Ciano will be submitting a letter to the U.S. Secretary of Education requesting flexibility as it relates to our ESSA plan and compulsory assessment and accountability. In the slides that follow, I'm going to walk you through the implications of that in 4 buckets. First, what does that mean for accountability? Second, what does that mean for assessment? Third, what does that mean for educator evaluation? And fourth, what are the implications of all of those actions as it relates to promotion and graduation? I'll say on the front end that there will certainly be logistical components of this that we will provide additional guidance on. For example, using our data systems to capture some of this in the coming weeks. But as we work out those logistical elements, I want to make sure that you have the information from this so that you feel clear that our priority is your priority, which is right now making sure children are healthy, safe, and fed. So with that, let's jump in. As it relates to accountability for K-12, the headline is that my team will not be producing and publishing publicly new school performance scores or district performance scores and letter grades for the 1920 school year. This was already true because of BESI's longstanding policy that says if you are out for 18 or more days, those scores are not produced. But it was further reinforced with a request to the governor for waivers of state law, and will be requested in Beth's letter to the U.S. Department of Education around compulsory testing and reporting of accountability results. Again, no SPS, no DPS. As it relates to accountability for early childhood, again, the 18-day provision applies here. So for many centers, there will be no requirement to produce this. We've also suspended all observations and shadow scoring requirements. I will note 85% of our centers already have enough observations to get ratings. We will work with the other 15% of sites on that. The reason for that is, of course, early childhood ratings, unlike K-12 ratings, are tied to school readiness tax credits, which can be a real win for our teachers, our directors, and our centers. So while we will obviously execute flexibility on the production of new performance profiles, if doing so would result in increased tax credits, we will work with folks to make sure that those new ratings exist so that you can maximize tax credits next year. As it relates to assessment, by this I mean LEAP, EOCs, ACT, etc. Beth will be submitting to the U.S. Department of Education a request of a waiver for all required annual testing in the grades and subjects that you see here. They've also requested a waiver of these laws from the governor, and we expect that to be issued. I will say, though, and I've heard this from many of you, we will work our very best to offer an optional state assessment as desired by parents or schools, as that's helpful and desired, so that there is an option should you want it. On educator evaluation, through both BESI's actions already in regulation, as well as the requested waivers to the governor, there will be and I want to use the correct term here, waiver of education evaluation results needed for the 2019-2020 school year. That said, as you know, these evaluations have serious implications for certification renewals and certification advancements. So in the coming, and no one has any interest in disrupting those things. So in the coming weeks, we will issue additional guidance on how to go and close all of this out in CIS, or Compass Information System. and how we will handle renewal and advancements requests to make sure that no educators are harmed in this process. We, of course, will not be able to produce value added this year if there's not compulsory testing of all children. And so we will continue to provide you the information we can, and you should expect more logistical updates around all things educator evaluation in the coming weeks. As it relates to graduation and promotion, Bessie had already secured with Sandy Holloway's leadership a set of waivers this weekend. We are requesting additional waivers from Bessie that will be granted around the requirements that students pass specific high school exams for graduation in the spring, as well as promotion requirements for grades 4 and 8. Again, if you're not offering compulsory testing to all children, then clearly school systems will need flexibility on this. Additional guidance on how this will work, how we will capture this in STS and the like will be offered in the coming weeks. Ken Bradford is captaining that for our team, and you should be on the lookout for additional logistical updates here. As you have specific questions, please submit those to LDOE COVID-19 support, and we will make sure that they are addressed in that logistical guidance that is forthcoming. I've listed for you here, and this PowerPoint is or will be in short order available on our website, all of the laws for which Bessie President Holloway and House Ed Chairman Garofalo have requested waivers from the governor. Again, we are optimistic that these will be granted in the near term, and we will share that executive order with you as we have it on our website. But you can see them listed here, and again, they relate to accountability, assessment, graduation, and teacher evaluation. Here's the final list of those. Again, much of this is contingent on action from US Ed, as you all well know, our obligation under federal law in dollars. Beth C&O's letter to US Ed will be going shortly, and it will request waivers of a whole host of requirements under ESEA, or also known as our ESSA plan, and you see those here. Again, we're going to request that assessments remain an option for schools and parents who desire them. I'm going to jump into a couple of very logistical points on assessment and accountability, and then I'm going to mute, pause, and take your questions about these topics. For ACT, many of you know that there was a national test date scheduled for April 4th. ACT has rescheduled that to June 13th, and they will be emailing any students who have registered for this about how to do a free reschedule shortly. So please make sure your students know that. We are working with ACT to identify additional possible dates for state administration, as for a whole host of reasons. We want to make sure our students get maximum access to this college entrance exam. But currently, some of you all are sitting on paper-based testing materials as we speak. ACT is asking that you meet FedEx on Thursday to mail those back, but the reality here is do the thing that keeps your staff and team healthy and safe, and this is not our top priority. Feeding children is. So if you have any concerns with that date, please reach out. Do not hesitate to reach out to the number here, and they will be accommodating. Cohort graduation data certification has been postponed. We all have higher priorities to work on right now. We will be in touch as things even out a bit about how to move this forward in the coming months. Dr. Jennifer Baird on my team will be offering office hours to assessment and accountability contacts tomorrow at 2 p.m. to collect further specific questions, reiterate this information, and share what we can. Your assessment and accountability contacts should be aware of this, but if you can share this information with them, I'd greatly appreciate it. At this time, I'm going to mute momentarily, see what questions have come in about assessment and accountability. I'll answer those, and then I'll pass the baton to Catherine. All right, we only have 2 questions at this time. The first is about high school LEAP testing. We are applying for a waiver with the federal government to suspend compulsory testing of all kids this spring. We are seeking to offer an optional assessment this spring instead. More information will be forthcoming on that waiver. There was a question around grading for students and report cards. Ken Bradford is captaining that work. That falls into the category of promotion and graduation. You should expect additional details there forthcoming. There was a question around the calculation of things like progress points. I don't have the particulars on that yet. I assume by that you mean the progress index, but we will not be producing a new SPS or DPS this year. My team will do everything we can to provide the information people can use as much as we can on the measures we can produce, because we know that's helpful in planning and measurement for systems, but that will not have stakes, and we will need to work through with you all and the board the impact of these transitions on the coming years. There's a question around high school graduates and what it will take to walk across the graduation stage this year, given this unprecedented pandemic. Again, the particulars of how to go through that process of determining graduation or not for each child will be part of additional guidance forthcoming from Ken Bradford in the near term. So we will do additional calls about this topic and communicate with very clear guidance on this issue. Stay tuned on that. There's a question around interest and opportunities and the specific results for schools there. We have the results from those surveys. Thank you so much for submitting those surveys. You'll do a great job submitting those across the state. We will share those back with schools and school systems. We will absolutely use those for planning. And I'll just emphasize again, for any of the indices for which we can provide you information, we absolutely will. So for whatever assessments have been completed, we will provide rosters for graduation data, et cetera. We will break all of that down as we normally do so that you have maximum information possible to plan from, understanding that this is a complicated and unique time. So, you know, we want to be a support in whatever way we can. Okay, at this time, I'm not seeing additional accountability and assessment questions. I'm going to pass the baton to Catherine Posniak to talk through special education, food and nutrition, payments, and federal updates.
Great, thank you, Jessica. All right, so I'm going to start off with special education. And I just first off want to acknowledge that I know that there is a lot of confusion around this. I would say that that is happening nationally. There's a lot of conversations as many schools across the country are closed about what is going on with special education. The Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education has been woefully slow about providing clear guidance on this. We did link the Q&A here on the latest that they have provided, and I expect that we will get more guidance, or I hope that we will get more guidance from them in the coming days. For now, what I want to do is go through what we do know and have a clarification from our call that we had on Saturday as well, just given some feedback that we've gotten from folks on this. So first off, want to say that schools are closed in Louisiana because of the governor's proclamation. So I want to be clear that this is not a choice between are you closing school and are you offering distance education. You might be offering distance education while schools are closed, but they are not two different things. And I want to be very clear about that. So because schools are closed, you are, in terms of the change of placement, You are not required to provide a change of placement notification or have an IEP meeting stemming from a change of placement. I know that we had said something different on Saturday and said that we would be issuing a template that people could use to provide that change of notification. We have since gotten clarification that that is not necessary, so that notification will not be required of any schools in the state. Remaining is that, again, in an extended closure, school systems are still responsible for reviewing how the closure impacted the delivery of special education and related services for each student who is on an IEP. If it's determined that progress is lost with that student will need compensatory services provided to them. Again, we've linked here the latest guidance that we have from the Department of Education on this. I hope that we will have more specific guidance for you in the coming days. Related to that are compliance timelines, most of which are dictated by federal law when it comes to governing special education. We are hearing that Congress, so the Families First bill that is being contemplated right now in Congress does not have provisions for education specifically in that. There are conversations happening in Washington about what will be done for education. We understand that Congress is considering putting a pause on the timelines, right, so that the clock isn't ticking on special education services and notices and things like that. That has not happened yet. Of course, we are trying to keep up to date on that, and when that changes, we will certainly let you know. In the meantime, the headline here is do what you can, the best that you can, and document. So we know that people are dealing with a bunch of different circumstances. You all are still figuring it out. Again, do what you can that is in the best interest of children, and have documentation about what you have done and the decisions that you have made. So that we're able to revisit this should we need to at a later time. Specifically here is guidance regarding IEP meetings, evaluations, and reevaluations. So if these cannot be held, document the delay, including the reason for the delay. This is, of course, going to be true if any of these meetings require a face-to-face assessment or observation. Again, note why it was that this was delayed, and then, once a school resumes, you would be able to conduct those evaluations or reevaluations. If the evaluation or reevaluation does not require a face-to-face assessment or observation, you could do this virtually or via teleconference. You would just need to have the consent of the parent or legal guardian in order to do so. So it has to be mutual in terms of conducting those via other means other than a face-to-face meeting. In terms of state compliance and timelines, there are a small number of rules that are in state policy. We had Bessie, as part of that initial list of waivers, waive or provide extensions for some of these timelines. So the initial evaluation timeline has been extended from 60 to 90 calendar days. So that accounts for the 30 days of the current closure of receiving parental consent. And this would apply for any of those evaluations that would have been due during the closure period, and the initial evaluations that otherwise would have been due within 15 calendar days of school reopening. Reevaluation timelines have also been extended for 30 calendar days for those students classified with a developmental delay due by their 9th birthday. All of the information on this slide is information that we shared with you on Saturday and has not changed. And there is a link here to the emergency waiver memo should you want to refer to it. So now I want to talk about distance education. And again, I want to make this clear that we have school closure with distance education. And so if a school system makes distance education available for all students, during a closure, it must ensure access to the extent possible for students with disabilities. Again, we know that there are many different contexts, extenuating circumstances. You all are trying to figure it out. To the extent possible, you do need to consider accommodations and accessibility for all students when you are providing these issues. If you cannot for some reason, again, you need to document that. And that will be something that you may have to revisit when you do that evaluation at the end of this period to determine what compensatory services are owed to the student. Again, this information that we provide, or this is consistent with the information that we provided to you on Saturday. So now I'm going to turn to food and nutrition services, specifically the open feeding programs that many of you are running in your schools and districts. So as of today, we currently have 235 locations. Some of them are already open. Some of them will be opening across the next few days that are serving children in 61 of our 64 parishes. USDA has granted flexibilities to schools to provide free meals to all children age 18 and under, as well as over age K-12 students, including students with disabilities through 22. So we did get some questions on that. And again, if you have a student enrolled in your K-12 system that is older than 18, particularly those students with disabilities, they are eligible for those free meals. Currently, Louisiana has waivers for, it says both here, but there are actually 4 waivers here. For 4 waivers that we have in terms of non-congregant feeding, allowing any of your schools to be eligible to offer this program, time separation requirements, and alternate meal delivery, which would allow some of you to deliver meals via bus, which I know many of you are contemplating. We have applied for additional waivers for meal pattern requirements. This is where, you know, you have to offer milk and you have to offer a bread, or you have to offer a certain number of components. We have applied for waivers for those meal pattern requirements. Those have not been granted yet, so you cannot proceed with those. But we will, of course, again, let you know once those have been granted. We've also asked for waivers related to monitoring and CEP reporting deadlines. I am asking that districts update your CNP online application, one, so that you can claim these meals for reimbursement. You have to list the sites that are going to be running these programs, or they're not eligible for those reimbursements. But most importantly, at this point, it is so that we can make sure that we are providing all of the locations that are available publicly. So currently on our website, we have a link on our COVID-19 page to the listing of all of the 235 sites that we currently have open. We will very shortly get a map that has all of the parishes in the state that you will be able to click so that you can find all of the feeding sites that are available within the parish. Within the next day, we will also have a site where you can type in an address and you can find all of the feeding locations closest to that address. In order for that to be useful, it means that we need to have all of the locations where you all are serving these meals. And so, and we have the link here to the list of school locations. If you know that you're serving meals and they're not on there, if they're not on there at all, you need to complete the CNP online application and update it so that we have record of that site. If it's that the address doesn't match, which is happening in some cases where we have a central office address or the address of a vendor listed in lieu of the actual site, if we have an address correction or a time correction or something like that, please email childnutritionprograms@la.gov, and we will make sure that we make that update as soon as possible. And I just want to say one other thing about these food nutrition, well, 2 other things about these food nutrition services. When you're operating an open feeding program, it does not matter if the child is at that school. It does not matter if that child is at a neighboring district. or even enrolled in private school, it is open to all children that meet the age requirements. The second thing I wanted to note is that there is some question about whether a child needs to be present when coming to, when collecting a meal. We are leaving this to the discretion of districts to monitor this, where you all can apply good judgment where good judgment is needed. From our perspective, as of now, USDA has not weighed into this. You could have a caregiver pick up meals on behalf of a child or children. We are hearing variations of this from districts, that some of them say that at least one child has to be present, or that it has to be a one-to-one ratio. Some people are taking that into consideration just to make sure that, you know, meals are going to the right places. I would say, again, we, from our perspective, it does not need, the child does not have to be present if you have a particular circumstance where you need to work that out. We understand that, and we want to provide that discretion, but we want to be clear. Again, the latest information that we have from USDA, they have not said that there needs to be a one-to-one identification of children in terms of being able to serve those meals. That may change at a later time. We will, of course, let you know if it comes to that. I would also ask that we have a number of early childhood centers, those that continue to be open, that are relying on these K-12 programs, and they have very small children. So if you have a center reaching out to you that is saying, I am trying to collect the food for the kids that are at my center, we ask to the extent possible that you're able to work out with that center so that they're not having to bus kids all around town in order to collect their meals. But again, we leave that to you to work out on a case-by-case basis. All right, now I'm going to move on to some money matters, and starting off with payments. The headline here is that we are paying you, and we are paying you as quickly as possible. None of our payment systems have been interrupted by this, and we know how important it is to make sure that your cash flow is maintained at this time. So MFP payments are set out to go out on the 25th per the payment schedule. Grant reimbursement requests are being issued via EGMS, and we are processing amendments and payments through the EGMS system as usual. CCAP payments are going out according to schedule, and an update on LA4. So we mentioned on the Saturday call that during the closures, payments will be based on enrollment rather than attendance. So how many of our kids you had enrolled in your program at the beginning of March, that is who we're going to pay you for when it comes to your March and April LA4 payments there. So I'm splitting this up into state-funded seats and TANF funding seats. So the last state-funded seats that you were paid for was for December. Payments, because we pay those on a quarterly basis, payments for January, February, and March are going to be issued this Thursday on March 19th. For TANF funding seats, we've paid you up through January. The February payments will be issued at the end of the month. We are asking for you to please submit your attendance data through March 13th, which was the last day that schools were open, as soon as possible via your Google attendance sheets. So we're basing enrollment, we're basing payment on enrollment numbers during the closure, but we will still need the attendance data through March 13th. So please make sure that you get that to us. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty over how long people are going to be reporting to buildings, et cetera. So, you know, I'm not saying that it's a firm deadline, but we're trying to get payment out to you as soon as possible. So the sooner you can get to us that March 13th data, we'll be able to then factor in the enrollment that you would have for the rest of the month and be able to get that payment out to you. We've gotten a lot of questions on federal funding issues, particularly when it comes to payment of employees that may be paid through, for instance, Title I or IDA or Title II. So Federal regulations require that any expense charged to federal grant funds, they require that they are consistent with policies and procedures that apply uniformly to both federally financed and other activities. So in other words, when you spend federal money, you should be following the same policies and procedures that apply when spending your non-federal funds, which includes your state and local funds. So, there have been many questions about whether or not you can pay employees. We have been clear that that is actually a decision that's made at the local level, given your policies. If it is that you can pay your teachers with your state funds at this time, then you can also do so with any of your teachers that are paid for with federal funds. So just so that you can say that you're not doing anything differently with your federal funding than you are with your state funding in terms of the application of rules, you'll be good to go. In addition, we've gotten questions about non-refundable costs that you have on grants, particularly related to travel with conferences and such that have been canceled. Again, the principle is the same. The treatment of federal money should be consistent with the treatment of non-federal money. So this is all to say, yep, you had a conference that you were going to that maybe had to do with your migrant grant, right? That has been canceled, and maybe you were charged a $150 fee for that cancellation, or you're not going to get your registration fees back. You would still code that to the grant that it would have been charged to in the first place. What you can't do is go and take all of your cancellation fees that you had for all of your expenses that may have been paid for with state funds and then go and charge them to your federal funding sources, right? So you can't do that on the back end. Again, you need to, but if you do have those charges, which, we all are going to have, we have them here at the state, you can go ahead and charge those, or those would be paid for through the method that you were going to pay for them in the first place. Many of you have asked about waiving different grant requirements, such as the 15% carryover cap for Title I, extending grant obligation periods, and also removing some of the constraints on some of the other grants, such as Title IV Part A, which has the percentage requirements of how much you need to spend on technology and different activities. We understand that the U.S. Department of Education, in collaboration with Congress, is considering various flexibilities that can be provided either through waiver by the Secretary or through law. None of those are final yet. We have not seen a draft, but there seems to be understanding from the U.S. Department of Education that flexibilities there, fiscal flexibilities will be necessary. So as we learn more, we will certainly share them with you. I wanted to put this here, though, to prevent anyone from feeling like suddenly that they had to go and find ways to spend a bunch of money while they didn't have kids in school. That will not be the case. There will be flexibilities there, we're certain of. We just don't know all of the details, so that is not something that you need to worry about at this time. And finally, I would say we strongly recommend that all districts are tracking their expenses related to COVID-19. We don't know what this is going to look like, but at some point there may be some financial relief, whether from the federal level or the state level. And you may be asked, what are the expenses that you have? And so while they are happening, I strongly urge you to come up with a system for figuring out how you are tagging those expenses. So when you are asked the question about what this costs you, you are able to give an answer. And with that, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to put this on mute so that we can collect questions on this section that covered, again, the special education, student nutrition services, payment, and federal funding. So I'm going to take this in chunks. One of our questions is, if a district attempts an effort to distance learning, does that affect change of placement obligation? No, this is what we clarified, is that from ED's perspective, schools are closed, even if there is distance education offered, in part because the requirement for minutes was also waived as well. So everyone uniformly across the state, school closure applies and change of placement is not required. We have a second question. If a school system requires distance learning, do we have to update the IEP? So I'm going to assume that this is also related to that, of whether or not that requires a change of placement, and it does not. And also the extent to which that is the environment that all students are in, right? They would not require an update to the IEP. The follow-up question to that is, how do special education teachers provide accommodations during distance learning? Again, this is where people are going to have to figure out what they can do given the resources that are available, and then that will have to be revisited when it comes to the review at the end of this time about whether or not that student will need to have compensatory services as well. I'm going to put it on pause again to look through some more questions. I will say there are a number of questions that are coming up about distance learning and distance education in general, not specific to special education. I'm going to leave that to my colleague, Ken Bradford, to address during his time, so he can offer you a definition then. There are questions about food nutrition services, about whether or not, excuse me, whether or not schools that are offering community meal services are, whether or not they're receiving reimbursement for related expenses such as security, meal service staff, et cetera. And the answer to that is no. You get the meal reimbursement for the meals that you have served. But if you are running your buses in order to serve those meals, et cetera, you cannot claim reimbursement on that at that time. But those would be among the expenses we would ask you to track related to COVID-19.
We're going to continue scrolling through questions. Just give us one moment.
We have another question on food nutrition. Please let us know if we can waive the milk and fruit requirement. At this time, we do not have that waiver from USDA. We have applied for it. That said, we have told your food service providers, we did this in a call yesterday, do what you can. If for some reason you don't have the milk and you need to serve the meals, it's better for them to get food than for you to withhold that. So do the thing that you can, given the resources that you have. That said, we are not hearing anything about food shortages at this time. And so we are not aware of that being a concern, but we also know that there may be other things that are interfering with whether or not all of the meal components can be required. We are trying our hardest to make sure that we get that waiver approved as quickly as possible. We'll put it on mute again. I have a question about federal monitoring and what is going on with that. I would say don't worry about that at this time. We're not going to be doing any on-site monitoring, nor is it the priority of districts right now, as you all are figuring out what is best for both your staff and Kens, and we'll come back to you with what we are doing on monitoring at a later time. There's also another question of, we have heard that if we are providing educational services for any students, then we are required to provide all IEP services, as we would technically not be providing educational services for all students. Again, to the extent possible, you should provide accommodations that and accessibility to all students. We realize that that may not be feasible in all cases. You all should document that, and that is why there is a review required at the end of this closure period, whenever that happens, where you have to evaluate whether or not that student was disadvantaged or did not make as much progress or actually regressed during that time, and that would be made up for with the compensatory services that would be provided to those students. So this is all to say, we do not want districts to feel like that they're in a situation where they have to do nothing for all of their students because they don't feel like that they can adequately provide everything to all of their students. We do think that there is, again, a best judgment middle ground there of do what you can, and where things fall short, document it, and we can come back and revisit that later if we feel like that there are issues that we need to address. And the rest of that, what I'm going to do is leave this for Ken. I'm going to turn it over to Ken at this time so that we can get through these items on distance education, dual enrollment, and academic resources. If you have questions that we were not able to answer, we will be including those in our FAQ.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to go through 4 things. I'm going to go through distance education, dual enrollment. I have a late developing TOPS update from Board of Regents and LOSFR that I'm going to share, and I'm going to go into academic resources. I'll start with the distance education requirements. On the proclamation Friday from the governor, the proclamation included language that said schools may offer distance education as capabilities exist. The department on Saturday, we provided a survey for school systems that we are asking them to complete by close of business tomorrow to indicate whether or not they are going to offer distance education services to their students. Our network teams will be working with you to finalize that survey and make that indication for us. What we have done, since there has been some ambiguous language around distance education, we are providing for you a definition whereby you can use this definition to answer either yes, you're going to offer distance education services, or you are not. That definition is going to be as follows. Distance education includes ongoing and regular teacher-initiated interaction for the purposes of teaching, evaluating, and providing assistance throughout the duration of the course and curriculum delivery. This may include, but is not limited to, synchronous or asynchronous instructive interaction, including emails, video conferencing, satellite learning, online chats, phone calls, and feedback on homework and assessments. There were two regulatory flexibilities provided in the proclamation. One was that the instructional minute requirements have been suspended for distance education courses and curriculum delivery. And two, that the minimum number of annual instructional time requirements have been suspended. One question that we keep getting is, do we have to take attendance when our students are doing distance education courses? Currently, it is required that attendance be taken at the beginning of the learning session, the beginning of the day, and/or the beginning of the class period. As part of the executive order request to the governor last evening from Bessie President Holloway and House Education Chair Garofalo, we are asking for the compulsory attendance law to be suspended. Should this compulsory attendance law be suspended as part of an executive order, this will eliminate the requirement for school systems to have to take the daily attendance each school day and at the beginning of each class period and/or online learning session. Next is an update relative to dual enrollment. We've been working with the Board of Regents about what to do with students whom are in dual enrollment courses. As many of you are aware, several of these students were taking courses on your high school campuses with one of your instructors. And several students are actually taking courses from the university. And now all of our post-secondary institutions have transferred their coursework to online. So the Board of Regents is committed to pursuing the following policy recommendations for students who are currently in dual enrollment courses relative to the college credit component of the course. Number one, they're going to provide an opportunity for students to complete the coursework during the remainder of this academic year. Number two will be to transition the course status to in progress, and the student would have until August 31st, 2020. It's important to note that if a student were to take that option of in progress, that the course will end in a final grade. And the third option that the Board of Regents is going to have for a policy recommendation is to do a withdrawal from the college course via an administrative withdrawal, and nothing would be posted to the official college transcript. So it will be possible for students, as an example, if we have a senior that is taking English 4, they're also doing that for dual enrollment credit, that they could withdraw from the dual enrollment component of the course. Nothing would be posted to the student transcript, and they could finish it out for their high school credit through high school Carnegie units, and for just a high school Carnegie unit only. So again, Board of Regents is going to be pursuing these policies and these flexibilities for students that are enrolled in dual enrollment courses. The next slide is relative to top scholarships. Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid from the Board of Regents called me late this morning, and then she followed up this afternoon and asked that I please share this with you. The current law states that if you take the ACT in June, and you use your June ACT score as your TOPS qualifying score, that the student will forfeit the fall semester of their TOPS, that first semester of TOPS. And she wanted me to reassure school systems that the Board of Regents is going to be asking the legislature to take action to make an exception to this provision, such that June ACT scores would allow a student to qualify at no penalty to the student. The next slide is relative to distance education providers. As stated Saturday on our call, there is no state approval process for online education providers. School systems, you have the choice and the autonomy to approve and use online providers of courses and curriculum. There are provisions within Bulletin 741 which outline distance education programs. It's relative to posting grades, teacher certification, etc. School systems also have an option to utilize online providers that have been vetted and approved as course choice providers by BESI. As part of BESI President Holloway's regulatory flexibilities that she approved is that we are extending the course choice provider catalog through June 30th, 2020. The department will be providing a list of course choice providers who will be extending course enrollment opportunities and participation opportunities through June 30th, 2020. We are working with them now, and we plan to provide that list to you as additional opportunities to expend your SCA dollars on these course choice providers. Next is the academic resources. We shared these resources with you Saturday. We are still on track for a March 18th launch of an online hub for distance learning supports. We're also set within the next 2 weeks to provide broadcast educational programming resources through LPB and YouTube channels. And we're going to continue to provide you updates on these calls as to the availability of those resources. We do have the next 3 slides, and I'm going to just summarize these real briefly. We have 5 different entities that are providing some sort of free resource available for you. And our staff has looked at these, and we feel that they would be extremely beneficial for you and provide great opportunities for you to do distance learning. First is that Google has extended Google Hangouts Meet premium features to all G Suite customers through July 1st. The second is that Cisco has a 90-day free trial use of WebEx that can be set up instantly without any financial commitment. Zoom is providing free Zoom webinar basic accounts for schools and teachers affected by the coronavirus. They will also waive the 40-minute time limit for schools. OutSchool is making available free remote teacher training webinars, which will demonstrate how to adapt teaching practices and curriculum to a live video chat classroom. And the 5th one is that the instructional platform Nearpod is temporarily offering free online learning access to schools impacted by the closures. This includes live weekly webinars, a guide to using Nearpod for distance learning, and lessons on the coronavirus to keep students, teachers, and parents informed. At this time, we'll pause, we'll group like questions, and we'll answer a few FAQs. There are two themes coming in the questions. There's one is about the distance education survey link. That was provided in Saturday's webinar. It's also going to be linked today on our last slide in next steps. Our network teams will be working with you to help identify whether you help identify for us whether you're doing distance education or you're not implementing distance education. So again, that link is in the last slide of this deck today. We'll go over that as part of next steps. The other questions that we're getting are relative to Carnegie units and instructional minutes. And what we are going to do is, as Ms. Bagion alluded to, is we are going to be providing to you here in the very near future the requirements for course credit, the requirements for graduation, and the flexibilities that come as a result of the governor's proclamation, the board president Holloway's request for an executive order, and board president Holloway's emergency rules that were suspended Saturday that we shared via a memo. So there's three pieces that we are looking at, just to be clear. There is the governor's proclamation that was made Friday. There was the Saturday, the Bessie President Holloway, where she suspended rules under emergency authority. And then there has been a request made for the next governor's executive order relative to suspending things such as assessments, such as compulsory attendance. And what we want to do is get those three things in place, reconcile those, and then we are going to provide you guidance to the field relative to awarding of credit, and we know especially credit for those seniors who are there for graduation. We're getting a question about what should we do about attendance for this week. Again, the current statute requires that attendance be taken. We are requesting, again, through a governor's executive order, that the compulsory attendance law be suspended. As soon as there is an executive order issued that would suspend compulsory attendance, from that point forward, attendance will not have to be taken. And again, we want to emphasize about the attendance. The attendance is for those students that are participating in distance education as defined on the slide that we shared earlier, on the slide that will be provided to you following this presentation today. And that is when it is a student that is participating in ongoing in regular teacher-initiated interaction. There's a question, a testing question coming in around LEAP 2025. I'm going to let Ms. Bagion answer that one.
Yeah, there's a question about testing being paper or online, and whether or not you'll have to opt into additional assessments. We'll have additional guidance on that forthcoming. This is, as you can imagine, a bit of a moving target right now. My team's objective is, in the easiest way possible, should you so desire or parents desire, to give you optional access to this exam. So please stay tuned for additional guidance in the coming weeks. If you have particular suggestions, concerns, or advice as we build out that structure, we'd certainly welcome it, and you can email that to us at assessment@la.gov. And there was also a question around work keys. Right now, assessment windows are obviously suspended, given that students are not coming to school buildings. We will revisit windows and timelines for optional assessments once students are safely back in school and we can securely administer those exams. So again, stay tuned for updates on that in the coming weeks.
Going to take us through I'm going to transition to her to take us through the technology and E-rate updates. Kara?
All states have been working with the FCC, and the FCC has now extended the FY 2020 Form 471 E-rate application. We want to make sure all of the schools are aware that you have until now, April 29th at 11:59 to submit your E-rate applications. This means that if there are additional services, if you need to expand your internet options at your school, add additional equipment, look at other services that you would like to apply for E-rate, you can do so now. So you may file another Form 470 for additional services and apply for that with a Form 471 by this April 29th deadline. The FCC has also directed USAC to provide all applicants who are going through review with current applications for next school year, as well as this school year, an additional 14 days to respond to any PIA request. So if you happen to miss it because of, transitions from work, you can still get an automatic extension and support. We have also been working with the FCC and requesting additional deadlines for your Form 486, 472, COMAD, invoicing, and other areas. As soon as we hear back from their ruling, which they are meeting this week, we'll share that information in these future webinars. Applicants can continue to monitor USAC's website for the latest information on all of these waivers and options. Additionally, we would like to share with everyone internet access options that are available for families and students. Commissioner Pai has launched the Keep America Connected Pledge and requested all of the broadband carriers to sign on to providing additional services and relief for our families and students over the next 60 days. During this time, service providers will not terminate any service to any residential or small business customer because of their inability to pay bills due to disruptions caused by this pandemic. They will also waive all late fees for any residential or small business customers that are incurred because of these economic circumstances, and they are also opening all Wi-Fi hotspots at any location where these are available to all Americans who need them. For limited income households, they may apply for internet access for $5 to $10 a month through the Lifeline program that is available at various wireless providers. We have provided links here to AT&T Access and CenturyLink Lifeline. Charter Communications, in their subscription area, will offer free Spectrum broadband and Wi-Fi for up to 60 days to any household with a K-12 or college student who does not already have a subscription for internet. Cox Communications is also offering a limited time first month free of their Connect to Compete service, which is usually $9.95 a month. So that first month will be free, and then it would be $9.95 a month after that. Also during this time, they will provide phones and remote desktop support to all of their users at no charge to help them with transitioning to the use of this technology. They have also included resources for a discounted refurbished equipment program to help people who do not have PCs at home and who need them. So you can go through this link to get discounted equipment. Lastly, they have a Learn from Home toolkit for schools to help in fast-tracking students without internet access to using devices and getting on the internet. Additionally, for our schools and their teachers, Cohort and Mobile Beacon are offering hotspots for schools to purchase services for either their schools, or either their teachers or their students. Cohort is offering two different options. One is where you can get a free hotspot device, and then you just pay for your 12-month service, or you can pay $100, or you can get $100 off with a 12-month service. So that is one option. The other is just a 6-month access plan, and then you pay for the smart spot, which is your hotspot. The average cost for that is $14.97 a month for a 12-month service. So basically, you would be looking at $192 for those. You would contact Michael Flood for that information. Mobile Beacon is offering school hotspots for $10 a month, and then those devices are going to range from $70 to $300 depending on how large that device is. Those devices that are the higher bandwidth are the larger devices that allow 15 to 20 people on to a single device. So we just wanted to provide that information for you. Also note that on these particular devices, these work on any network, so on any carrier network. So if you are in an area that does not have AT&T access but has Verizon, it will connect there, and you transition to an area where Verizon is not very receptive and AT&T is, it will switch over to that. So it will go across any carrier's network. And with that, I'll stop and check for any questions.
Good afternoon. This is Babs CNO. I wanted to update you on all the the flexibilities that we've been seeking over the past few days. As you know, we have emergency waiver memo right now that addresses a number of issues. It's school requirements and the students with disabilities, any rules impacting educators, non-public and charter public schools, and early learning centers. We also issued a letter yesterday to the governor to ask for an executive order to cover a broader range of flexibilities, and we expect that to be coming shortly. In addition to that, we are moving forward with a letter to the U.S. Department of Education with regards to asking for certain federal waivers at that stage as well. So we just want you to know we have a number of things in order to make your life simpler and make sure that you can keep focused on what's really important right now. And we'll be talking about these things over the next few days in more detail. I'll stop right there and see if there's any particular questions. Okay, so lastly, we wanted to remind you to please complete the survey that is out on the web. It's called the School District Charter School COVID-19 Education Planning Survey. It's important for us to keep abreast of what's going on in your locations. The governor has asked us to get a feel for that. It's a real short survey, so if you would go to that link and complete it, we would greatly appreciate it. I know that the team has provided you with a lot of information today, and I really appreciate all of you listening and spending so much time with us today. I know it's a lot. Over the next few days, I will try to pay some particular attention to different groups of schools. In particular, trying to get with all the charter school leaders at some point and the non-public school leaders. This afternoon, I'll be having a call with just the superintendents, because at this point, I know that it's been a quick last few days, but I know that most of you don't really know who I am, and I want just some more intimate calls where we can talk about, I can introduce myself and make sure that y'all know who is leading the charge to assist you right now. So we'll start doing that over the next couple of days. I certainly appreciate all your attention. Please stay healthy and safe out there. It's important that all of you take care of yourselves because we have so many children to worry about. So with that, I'll close for the day. Thank you so much. Goodbye.